Hello everybody, this is Scott Stengel from Melco Applications team here today to talk to you with some tips on how to speed up your digitizing time. We'll go over accelerator keys and shortcuts and way to speed up your digitizing time. But first, we want to slow down a little bit, I guess. So what I'm highly recommending to you, and I still do all the time with almost every logo that's got any kind of complexity to it, is to first sit down and study the design. When you look it over, you want to take some notes on which colors you'd like to go in which order. Sometimes, like we've said in the past, repeating colors is the way to go for registration or ease of sewing. But it's very important that you sit down and plan it out. Write down, first color is green, that's the mountains. The second color is brown, that's whatever portion of the design that counts for. And then when you're digitizing it, you can get on a roll. So you get a rhythm going, and that's the way to get it done the fastest. But you don't want to fall into the problems of, oh, I didn't think this out. I got painted or stitched into a corner. I got all these trims I have to do. It'll keep you away from that, as well as another problem is if you have say a certain shape and you're not quite sure how to digitize it. If what you think you have in mind is going to actually work, it's really good idea to prototype a couple of those. Try digitizing a couple of stars and see if you got it right, because you sure don't want to have to go back and edit everything. So a little more time on the front end planning and stitching challenged areas to see if you got it right can pay off big in the long run. I have Nate Moore here with me, if you've noticed, just like normal, and he'll answer your questions. This will also be recorded shortly after it's completed, so you can come back and watch later if you want. Send in your questions, we'll answer them. We'll also be monitoring it after, so we'll answer questions even after the show is complete. Okay, so after we study and write down our notes and colors and try our prototypes and we have everything set to go, let's start with some tips to speed you up. First thing is there's a great feature inside of Design Shop called Accelerator keys. What these are keyboard shortcuts that take the place of having you click on different tools and things like that to get it done. It is by far the fastest way to work. Both Nate and I have pretty much our whole keyboard plastered with all the keyboard shortcuts.
They're completely different from each other.
They are, yeah. And so yeah, I mean that kind of is interesting because you don't realize once you pick a key, you're like, yeah, I'll just use this for now. And then 6 months later, you're so used to using it, it's hard to switch them. So I guess it's hard to make good choices off the bat, but it's worth thinking out. The Design Shop actually comes with certain accelerator keys built in. So first of all, where do we find it? It's real simple. We go up to Tools, and it is Accelerator Editor. So what we do is tell it, hey, for a certain input type, like let's say walk normal, which key do I want to make that on the keypad? You can use combinations, Control plus a key, all sorts of stuff like that. It just will not let you assign a keyboard key that's already been assigned for another tool. So how to input these is pretty simple. I have actual size, so when I press whatever key I'm going to assign it to, I want it to draw the logo or embroidery design at actual size so I can better see. The letters big enough, how does stuff look, fat enough, all that stuff. So right here we can see in the gray that Melco has put in Alt plus A by default. That's an unchangeable value that engineering has put in, and a lot of these have these decided defaults for you. I also selected the number 1. I have 0 for draw the whole design to fit the screen, and I have 1 for draw actual size. What's yours?
I don't think I have one
It
for
doesn't
that.
have one for that. Okay. So if I wanted to assign one, or let's say assign another one, you can have as many as you want. Which you really wouldn't do, but to show you how this works, we're going to assign actual size to another key. So what I do is I click in the box to select a new shortcut key, and I will make this
Control Shift A.
yeah,
Why not?
Control Shift A.
Haha.
All right, now you would normally hit OK and move on. That will not assign it. You have to put this in and then click Assign. And it tells me that it's already used for Select Entire Design.
Haha. Sorry.
So that's good. That tells us we need to pick something different. So we'll do, I don't know, Shift 5. I don't think that's used for anything. Boom. Now you see how that showed up in there. So Shift 5 will draw actual size whenever I push it, or the number 1 key, or Alt A. You can go through the list, and you can also kind of set these up if you're used to some other version of software and you're used to their hotkeys. You can come to us, put those in similar to what you use in the past, and boy, it brings you up to speed very, very quickly. Nice feature. Other software I've used, they hard code them and you don't have any choice to change them. You learn them or else. This is nice because it gives you a lot of flexibility. More help on that in the manuals on Accelerator keys a little. I mean, you can go back over this, but it's pretty simple. You can remove them, or I never have reset all. But
If you want to see what a command or something has as its hotkey that's already there, you don't have to look through this list to find it. If you go to the menus and the drop downs, on the right hand side, you'll see any of them that are in there, including ones that you've added. Which is pretty cool. So go back to view for a second because that was really great. Scott just added that actual size is at 1. So you see 1 and then comma Alt A, so you can see both versions of that key command that's in there. Fit selection, I can see that he's got it set to F. So I can see any of them that he's added. So that's really, really nice.
There's 0 for fit everything in the window. I use B for scale zoom box is what I know. What do we call it? Graphic zoom in or something. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, they'll all show up right here. So you can review them. You can. It's a little file that you can take from computer to computer if you like to. So you don't have to plug all these in each time.
Terry's asking a question about is this on every level of Design Shop? And I don't know the answer, so I'm gonna swap on this computer. You keep going, and I will try to get an answer to that.
Okay.
But if I look completely distracted, it's because I am.
I gotta believe that it probably is, but okay. So there's one accelerator key that is my favorite I want to share with you because it helps me really establish a rhythm when you're digitizing. Generally, you're going to be switching input types. Let's say you go from walk stitch to column, walk stitch, column. So you're doing digitizing lettering. It's a common thing to do. Rather than have to go up and click the input tool type, which takes some time to switch back and forth, or to push the different hotkeys for each one, we have a feature in there which is select previous insert tool. So this is really good. Let's say that I start out and I'm digitizing walk stitches. So I get that all set. Boom. Now I switch to the column tool and I'm going to digitize a column. Column 1. Now I don't have to click to go back here because it remembers the 2. So I have assigned the spacebar as the previous insert tool, and so you can see every time I click it, look in the upper left, it's switching as I hit the spacebar from one tool to the other. Huge time saver. really allows you to focus on your artwork digitizing instead of which tools you're clicking and did I pick the wrong one. So previous insert tool is good. I have it set at spacebar, but you
So do I.
can. Yeah, so does Nate. So that's a good choice because it's a nice wide key on your keyboard. You can hit it with your thumb, and it doesn't disturb your focus.
And so to answer the question, Accelerator Editor appears to kick in at the Design Shop level, so Design Shop Lite doesn't have it, but you don't have a lot of digitizing tools either. So once you start getting a lot of the tools, and you got a few more Accelerator keys to add to it, so it kicks in at the Design Shop level.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll talk about constraining. This is huge in my list because you're always moving stuff exactly horizontally or vertically. You don't want stuff to move at an angle, and so the Alt key is completely your friend. Here's use of it. We talked about this before, but you select the element, and then you know, I can move it any direction here with nothing pushed. As soon as I hold Alt, now it will either move horizontally or vertically, but I can't move it at an angle. You're always moving stuff to line up on baselines or you know, stuff like that. And so this is a very, very useful tool. So it constrains movement of elements to 90 degrees. Another constrained key is Alt, but when we're applying it, instead of moving an element to sizing the element, basically we're messing with the bounding boxes. So I could push this over here and grab from the other side and all that, but if I hold Alt and grab in the middle, now you see it scales both sides of this element of the bounding box proportionally around the center. That's a time saver. Rather than push one side over and have to grab the element and try and get it centered, just center it around where it already is, and it'll be much faster for you. Okay, along with that though, if I do want to scale this whole element around its center, I can grab a corner of the bounding box, and now I'm going to hold Alt plus Shift. And now as I scale, you see that it's scaling around its origin. This is really good. I've had logos in the past. Let's say you have a circle logo and then you have arced letters above and below it. You want to go in and shrink the logo maybe 3-4% or something for balance. You can grab the whole logo and scale it around its own origin rather than grab a corner of the bounding box, move it down, and then have to move the whole element back to center. You also can hold Shift if you drag the corner of the bounding box, and it will keep the aspect ratio, but here again you would have to move it back to center when you are all done. Okay, another one is Control plus drag when it comes to circle nodes. So I'm going to put one in here. When you digitize, you see how this is based on a circle. We've talked about this in the past. I just want to cover it for anyone who happened to miss those. If I don't hold Control, it becomes a Bezier arc. And so hey, sometimes that's easier to form the shapes of certain embroidery elements. Nate's a fan of Bezier. I kind of grew up with Melco, and everything is based on a circle. So if I select a curved element, hold Control, and move it, it goes back to a circle. No matter what I do, it's always going to be based on a circle. I just find this works better for a lot of different embroidery elements. And pretty much when I'm editing, you know, I could just about duct tape the Control key in for as much as I use it. When you're digitizing, the curves are based on circles, but when you're editing, it can be a little frustrating if you're just trying to bump something in and it's distorting. If you hold Control while you drag the curved node, it's going to stay a circle. This is very important. Also, you know, don't forget you can easily add more nodes just by clicking on the curve. It doesn't distort the shape, it just adds more nodes so you have more control to nudge little parts of the curves and stuff like that. Okay.
There was a question about the keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
Can you copy them from one computer and put them on another?
Yeah, you can. Should we put it? We should put it up.
That's up to you.
So yeah, it's a little. Mine is 5K file. It's called Accelerators, and it's .xml file. It lives inside of your user settings, and what we'll do is, if you go to give me some time after this is over, and then go to the FAQ, I'll show you what that's like. This is Melco service, melco-service.com, and here's the website. There's FAQ in the corner, or it's also located at the bottom, I think. But once you click here, in the search box, type accelerators, and it will take you to the 5K file that I have in case you want to use mine. It also has a PDF that lists what all the hotkeys are and what they control, and another one that says where to put them.
I was going to say, are we going to throw the path in there?
Yeah, the kind of key thing with where to put it is you first have to go to Control Panel and Folder Options and the View tab in the middle, and tell your computer to show you hidden files. It's a hidden file, and you won't see the folder and where to put it unless you turn that on. Then you can copy it, download it, and put it in there, restart Design Shop, and you'll have all my accelerator keys. You can go and tweak them, change them, do whatever you want for there at that point. But yeah, we'll put this on the FAQ right after this is over. So to answer your question, I think I probably did, right? It's a little 5K file. So yeah, I've taken that little 5K file and moved it from new. Reconnection successful. Okay. Okay, so that answers the question about where the files are, how to move them, all that kind of stuff. Okay, also, sometimes when it comes to moving elements around, you want to nudge it just a little bit. It's very hard when you're trying to move with the mouse to keep stuff, you know, from getting out of hand. So just want to let you know that, like I've mentioned before, I find them very important, is you can use the keyboard arrow keys to nudge either elements and or elements very simply. So to move an element, if I don't want it to move up or down, just sideways, if I hold shift and then with the number lock off or your additional set of arrow keys, every time I'm hitting the left arrow, it's moving one embroidery point. So that's a very, very small distance, but makes a big difference.
1/10 of a millimeter.
Yep. And then also I can use Shift plus Alt together, and now my moves are 10 points apiece. So larger moves, but still constrained in one direction.
Shift Control.
Shift Control. And the arrows are 100-point moves, so that's quite considerable, but still keeps it from moving up or down. You know, nudging is common with, you know, digitized lettering, stuff like that.
So, sorry.
I also use the 100-pointer. Sometimes I need to get like the fills and the stuff away from a logo or whatever that I'm going to work on.
And you want to count back?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So,
no, I've never done that. That's totally weird.
So like 500 points to one side, do what I have to, and then 500 points back, and I know it's exactly the same.
So that 1, 10, and 100, so Alt being 10 and Control being 100, that's a reoccurring theme in Design Shop. If you're running through the stitch list and you want to go 10 stitches at a time, you can hold Alt and press the arrow key down on the stitch list and you go 10 stitches at a time. Or if you want to go 100, you can hold Control and it'll go 100 stitches at a time. So you'll see that kind of repeated throughout, so it'll start to become familiar.
Good, good. Also, if you have a certain part of your design that you want to move a precise amount, another thing you can do is right-click and you go to Scale, And I'll pull that window over. And there is a position window. And so if I wanted this to move, you know, an inch over exactly, I would just plug in, say, 1 inch in X and hit apply, and it moves perfectly. So precision movements, if you're doing piece goods or stuff like that where you need to have lines or elements in a certain position, this can be very beneficial to you because you don't have to turn on the grid, count your movements or anything like this. You know that this is precise movements.
I know that exists and I forget about it, and then you show it to me and I'm always like, oh yeah.
All right, so next thing that's kind of huge that we get a lot of questions on here is, let's say that I digitize this, but I don't want it to be a curve. I want this to be straight. Change my mind, whatever the reason is. So the way to change a curved node to a straight and vice versa is to hold shift and click on it. But you notice it's a straight now, but it still have 2 curved lines. So there is a command to straighten the curved lines, and that's what I'm going to share with you. It's Control plus right click on the line turns it into a straight line. Control plus right click on the line turns it to a straight line. If I wanted to shift click back to a curve, you see it'll go back and forth. But going from a curve back to a straight, people don't understand how to straighten out the lines. So Control plus right click.
Why won't shift click go back to that?
I don't know.
No. So if you shift click back on that, you'll turn it back to a straight point. What's the difference in a straight point and a curve point? The handles are connected or they're not. So on a curve point, you move one handle, it moves the other. On a straight point, you move one, the other one stays put. So if you want to straighten it out, Scott's right. You've got to right click and click on a line. So I tried to set you up, and I totally set you up.
That's it's the Bezier thing. You got it down. That's cool. All right. So that's how to straighten curved lines. Don't forget, Control plus right click. The other thing I can do to speed up my time is, rather than grabbing 2 nodes and moving those, I can grab the line itself and move it, and it's going to take and distort it. Or if it's straights, it'll move the whole line. And basically, it affects the line between 2 nodes at a time. All right. Another problem that I find, or I answer often, is when I click on a logo to select a certain element, I can't seem to get a hold of the element I want. It always selects the wrong thing. Well, it's not the wrong thing, but let me kind of show you how this works. So here's a design we do for class. So if I want to if I want to edit the fill, it can grab it there. Here I can grab it. If I'm zoomed way back, sometimes I can't grab what I'm looking for. And the answer, the way to do that, is to zoom in. Because if it's drawn at the actual size, it doesn't necessarily want to select it sometimes. But if you zoom in, it uses a different process called hit testing, which will, if you're over the element, it will select it. There's a set of keys, select previous and next element over here once I have stuff selected. It's a little bit like that. So if you have problems selecting layered elements that are not on the top, the key is zoom in a little bit and try it again, and you're going to usually have success.
Can you set those up to accelerator keys so you can go down through them? Sorry, you just made me think of that.
That's a cool idea.
I didn't think about it. I totally thought that's where you were going. I'm like, that's brilliant.
All right, so selecting multiple nodes. I want to go over that real quick. I mean, obviously, let's say, here's what I'm selecting. If I drag select, shift and drag select, I'm going to get one whole side. That's easy. It's not so easy if something is it's just not rectangularly selectable. How about that one? It's not easy to select in a rectangle. Here's one here. So let's say that I want to select these here, but the nodes are going to get in the way. Another tool we have, which is custom select. and that is located right over here. I have it hotkeyed C. How clever is that, huh? So when I hit C, it turns to the star, and now if I click and drag, I can go around whatever shape, however intricate it might be, and then I hit enter, and it selects everything inside of that shape. This is a huge time saver because you can select all sorts of crazy stuff for whatever you can draw, you know, a shape around. So custom select, very, very useful.
While you're in there,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to select multiple wireframe points, and you have a wireframe element selected, and they can be selected via rectangle. So let's say you wanted to grab the two ones on the farthest left. With it selected, you can hold Shift and click and drag a box around them. Yeah, no, totally. So like start down here, hold Shift,
yep,
click and drag a box. Bam!
Wow. 2 boxes.
That's one that I didn't know about until a few years ago, and I use it all the time now.
Cool.
And
I'll start.
I know.
I didn't know about it either.
And you totally can set up previous and next element as hotkeys. That is available to you.
Okay. And there is also, you know, I can, if I knew what nodes I want, another trick like through Windows would be to click on the first node, hold Control, click there, whichever ones I happen to want to select. I can do that. Shift click will select the range from first to second, and the normal stuff like that. So that can speed up your selection of nodes. Faster you can select and work on them, faster you can move on to the next part.
Something I just thought of, and I don't want to throw you off.
Go ahead. No, that's good.
Size of the input points. I know it's not a hotkey.
Enlarge the nodes. That's my next section. Nate just brought up what I was going to talk about next. As the monitors keep increasing in resolution, sometimes beneficial to increase the size of your input nodes. And that's very simple to do. So I go up top to, is it view? Where? I forgot where this is. Object, tools, tools, options, preferences, and here's the point size right here. You can enlarge them, make them smaller, all sorts of stuff like that. All right, next one. So there's a pretty interesting feature that we added for V10 that I really like, and I want to show you it. Sometimes can be confusing what you're clicking on, like what am I selecting? When I click, what am I going to get? And so we've made that easier for you. So here is Elysian Fields Farms, and if you see my mouse, it has the 4 arrows. That means that it's going to move the whole element if I would click and drag or do whatever at this point. Watch as I move over and I get over a node, it changes to that node. This is telling me that if I click now, I'm going to select a straight node, and of course here's the curved node. Also, beyond that, it'll tell me, boom, right now I would be dragging the start-stop marker. And if I'm over the line, it will show me that I would be dragging the line now. So it'll show you without clicking and selecting the wrong thing if they're layered on top of one another, like the stop marker is close to the end node, something like that. This is a very good way to find out and better select first time. All right. There's also, go back to my little scrap file here. If I do complex fill, a lot of times you can use complex fill in a satin for lettering and stuff like that. The Unifill has splices and multiple stitch direction lines and all that kind of stuff. We can also set the end to it. So let me just digitize, I'll just work on some simple shape. Whoops.
You've been punching column 2s for a while.
I have. Let's try that again. All right. So I'm just going to do, say this, and then let's just say that here's the shape. I start here, stop here, maybe it's this direction. Now, if I want to shorten up this end. I mean, obviously in this shape, it would just be like drag them and move them up. But another way that I want to let you know of, if it's digitized in complex fill, is to right click in stitch direction mode, and that will set the end point. It's a red line instead of a blue, which normally does the regular stitch direction selecting lines. But you can use that to generate a full stitch across, which is what you always want for the last stitch, and to shorten it up. So this is like the push compensation we've talked to before. You can actually use that to cut off the last few stitches if that's what you want.
And if, would you delete that for me?
Delete this.
So if for some reason that wasn't generating a full stitch on the end and you wanted it to be on the end, but you wanted it to match up to the artwork, you can also right click and drag just off the edge of it and it will snap to that edge. So go that way, there, right click and drag across. And it'll snap to the end.
To the end of it.
Just to give you that full stitch.
There. Oh yeah, that's important. You always want to have a full stitch. If you're turning tight corners in something where short stitches are getting generated, sometimes.
And just every now and then there's a weird shape where it's like, I really want to come to a point. And you're like, no, I really want you to be a full stitch. This gets it there.
Okay, so next is digitizing cursors. You know, a lot of people just use the arrow by default, but the full screen cursor, as you've seen me use, makes a huge difference. And so I will show you that. Oh, here's you know, vector art. Let's say I'm digitizing these letters or something like that. When I grab the tool, you can see that I have the full screen cursor on. This is located under Tools, Options, Preferences, and right here is all your digitizing cursors. You can see full screen is right here. Try them out, see which ones you like. The way that I work is I use full screen crosshair for almost all of my digitizing. The reason, as I'll show you in a minute, is it lines up. It helps you see if you're on the same baseline or you know, the same vertical line as other stuff that you've got. When I'm digitizing script lettering or stuff that's not, you know, sort of 90-degree straight stuff, I usually go to the arrow because I don't want the full screen crosshair to get in the way. Okay, so the example here would be I digitized this serif right here, and then, you know, normally I'd stitch the rest of the letter. Now I'm working on the A. So when I grab, let's say, the column tool after I've done underlay and all that, you can see that where I start here, I can look to the left and it shows me where the bottom and the top of the previously digitized elements are. I also know if I want this to be compensated for push, like we talked about before, you know, I can line up here, but when I finish my columns, I can move up, you know, 4 points or 1 stitch or whatever you want. It's just going to drastically help you line stuff up. I know there was one time in beta when we broke it, and you should have heard the people squeal, so we know how popular it is. So, really good crosshair cursor to use. I think once you start, you won't turn it off. So, anything else on crosshairs? Which one do you like, Nate?
I tend to use the arrow most of the time, but I use Constrain Line, and I use another tool that I think you're going to talk about called Snap to Grid to line that up. For me, having the extra lines is a bit too much for my eyes sometimes, so I'll just leave it on the arrow and have it snap automatically. But when I'm doing teeny tiny lettering and I really don't want to futz with editing later, I will use full screen so that I'm lining stuff up the first time.
You know, this is, of course, really good artwork. It's vector.
Yeah.
But I think when I digitized forever of my own business, the artwork you get in for logos is not necessarily as good as this. It can be, you know, stair-stepped like faxes, and small JPEG files or GIFs that it's just not really clear.
GIFs are rough.
So it can help you once you establish, the height that one serif is, and you're moving across the line. It can help you keep them all the same. Of course, I like Control D for duplicate and just actually use the same one and slide it. But
I like that. I'm also severely guilty of taking the very first one, duplicating it, changing the color, and stretching it across the entire thing, so I have my own artwork behind it.
cool idea. I like that.
Oh.
All right, so let me go back to Elysian Fields.
So we have a request from a coworker to show change element type shortcuts when you get to wherever a point that you can do that.
Change element type.
Shift click.
Oh.
Click.
Okay. That's coming up. Yeah.
Cool. I thought it was, but
Excellent.
it was on there. And
All these great minds think alike, right? All right. So also, just to let you know, if I want to set an exact size, don't forget down here the scale toolbar and rotate is very important. If I just wanted to go, hey, you know what? I want this to be 4 instead of 4 and 4.4 inches. If I delete that and click, I'm done. It scales it proportionally with Y and X because this box is the lock box is checked. But it's a very, very fast way to set exact dimensions for elements or for entire logos or whatever you have. Also, don't forget that if I click over the H or the W, I get percentage and also rotate. This is very, very quick to get to. I want to take out 3% or something. You just set it at 97 for one of them and click on the screen and it's done. Or rotate by 1 or 10 or whatever degrees you want. Very, very cool to use this. I use it very often. You can use it to scale artwork too.
Mm-hmm.
If you brought a JPEG in and it was a little too big, you can scale it right here instead of having to bring it to a graphics type program and scale it there. Yeah?
I use a different tool for that.
Go ahead.
The ruler.
The ruler, oh yes. So if you select the ruler, which is right up here, hey, it's R on my Accelerator keys.
Just turn it back off.
And I right click, I can go ahead.
No, you're good.
Set a certain distance. There we go, like here. Boom. And I would tell it the actual dimensions.
Yeah, so if you right click and drag, it'll say I want this distance and this is what you measured it as, and then you get to tell it what you want that to be. So it doesn't have to be the width or the height. It can be some other weird angle or some specific segment of your artwork. You can say, I want this little chunk to be 1/4 of an inch, and then it will scale everything else to match that when you type that in. I use that far more often than I thought I would.
All right, so grab the ruler, right click and drag, and then when you let go, you'll see this window come up. Okay, so there's another really cool feature that saves me time, and it is select same type. So we have a feature that allows you to select the same elements, the same input type elements together. So you don't have to go and select them in your project list or anything like that. Really simple. If I wanted to select, let's say, all the column 1s in this design, I could just select any one of them, right click, it goes under select, and then I go select same type. Now all the column 1s in this whole design are selected, and I can affect them just by changing, properties or something like that on all of them. Select all the fills in a design. Select all the, let's say, single line columns because I want to increase everything by a couple of points or something like that.
Sorry, I'm smiling because you can tell what, just by what's selected on screen right now for you guys, you can tell what tool Scott likes to use for what types of shapes. So the very rectilinear shapes he's using in column 1 because that's what's selected, and then the very curvilinear shapes like the S and the swoosh underneath are not selected because he likes to use column 2 for that, because it tends to fan those stitches beautifully through a curve. So
Right.
I think it's really funny that in doing that you can see into how you think and how you process, how you digitize.
So, and back to the accelerator keys, if I wanted to select column 1, that's in my case because I picked Q because it's in the upper right. That's where I got one hand on the mouse, and you know, it's just convenient for me. So Shift Q is column 2. So I can go between the two column tools, not a single line, but column 1 to column 2 just by Shift Q or Q to switch back and forth.
I should set up my input tools to hotkeys. I don't.
Alright, so next thing is change element type. Boy, this is very, very good. So I'm going to just start a new window on this real quick. Let's say there's several uses. Here's one, first one. So mistakenly I had the walk stitch tool I selected instead of a single line. And so I digitized whatever the shape that I wanted, and oh man, when I hit enter I realized it's a walk stitch. I wanted single line. Well, I better start over. Change element type. We give you the ability to kind of change anything into anything else within reasons if it's applicable. So for this, the icon is located right here, change element type. So I could come to here and I could say, no, I wanted that to be single line center. I have my choice. Do I want to add or replace? In this case, I don't want the old one. I just want to replace it with single line. So I'm going to do replace. Now it's done that fast. I'll go undo so you can see again. Another way to do this is you can hold Control for replace or Shift for add. So here we're going back to replace. Rather than click on the icon to bring it up, I can just hold Control and click on single line, and that's it. So that's a shortcut way to keep from having to use change element type. Another use for it is in your digitizing. Let's just say that I have a complex fill, and I don't know, whatever shape it is. Start here, stop here, here's the angle. If I wanted to add a satin stitch border around this, yeah, I could grab the single line tool and go and, you know, hit the edge of it. But since I already know the edge, because the complex fill has stored that, I can make the single line border that I'm going to use to put a column border around this fill. I'm going to add it, actually. So I could go here, I could select the single line and do add to add it to it, and it would do it. But the shortcut is with the fill selected, if I hold shift and I click on single line, I can even go in and change the color or whatever I want to do at that point. It's that fast to put a border around a column. A column border around a fill.
There you go.
One note of caution here is it does not understand the compensation that we've talked about, how stretching the sides and cutting off the top and the bottom are important. So you need to go in and hand edit that. But you know, really not that big of a deal. I'm going to cut off some of the top, I'm going to drag the sides a little bit, and I'm finished. But know that you do have to
yeah, it's all based on the wireframe outline.
Yes, exactly. Okay, also there is a grid feature which we all know about. If I left click here, you can see that I get a grid, helps me count, measuring, stuff like that. This is based on 1/4 inch. And so I can turn the grid on or off just to help me line stuff up better. But there is also a snap to grid. So if you have trouble lining points up, let's say you have a closed shape that's a column and you want to line up the front to the back, Shift Enter closes a shape. Don't forget that. But sometimes with the snap to grid on, it just makes it easier to line the things up. Now I don't have to have the grid on to use the snap to grid. Sometimes that, as Nate says, the multiple lines all over can get confusing. What I do is I go up to View, and then I turn snap to grid mode on. Now just once again, if I right click on the icon, you can see that I can change the color, and I can change the spacing here. So this is 1/2 inch, but it's split up by 2, so those are 1/4 inch. So with Snap to Grid on, it can really save you some time and help line your stuff up. Watch this, and I'll zoom in. When you click, you see how I can't just put a node wherever I like now. It's snapping to the 1/4 inch points. Horizontal work, you know, trying to set up templates and whatnot that you're maybe using in your designs. This is a very good feature. Sometimes if you're doing really precise curves and stuff like that, it can get in the way a little bit, but another tool to help speed things up for you is Snap to Grid.
Yeah, I'm so goofy that I have my grid set to embroidery points, and I have it turned off because that's just way too many lines on my screen. But every now and then I will make my grid bigger for different things. Just don't do that and then forget to put it back to what you're used to, because that'll make your cursor jump around a whole lot when you're digitizing.
Also, zooming, another way to turbocharge. You want to stay away from having to draw the zoom box, you know, all the time, the graphical zoom in and boom. We have a much faster way. Everybody has a wheel on their mouse now, pretty much. So if I hold shift and I wheel my mouse, the design will either come in and out very fast in huge, large increments, so I can zoom in here by shift plus wheel. I could work on the E, now I can zoom back, and now I can zoom right in on the S. You see how fast that is to just zoom in and out and in and out. Don't forget about that shift and the wheel on the mouse. The cooler part about it is the center of the mouse arrow is the center of your zoom box. So that's why when I point it to a different part of the design and zoom in, I'm zooming right to that section. This is a huge time saver. Also, if I have multiple things selected, I won't go into this too much in detail, but we have the alignment keys, so don't forget, you can read about those in the manual. You can space things apart, you can align them horizontally, vertically, all sorts of stuff there. Also, there's a subtract and add tools, so if I have 2 fills that are over the top of one another, I don't want to sew both layers, it will cut it out for the section you know, underneath, so you don't sew 2 layers at a time. This one's pretty simple to understand.
One caveat with that one is that it only works with fills, be they vector or complex, but it only works with fills. But if you have change element type, you can add and make a complex fill out of something if you need to knock it out, but leave it, like if I wanted the E and I wanted to knock out underneath, I wouldn't, because there's not enough room and I wouldn't want to meet back up with myself. But if I did, I could grab all those elements of the E and I could add a complex fill, combine all those elements, and then knock them out of the one underneath. Sometimes that's faster, sometimes it's not. It's kind of up to you. One thing that I wanted to ask if you would show, you were zooming in with the scroll wheel with shift, and it goes in and out from the mouse with shift. With alt, it goes from the center of the screen. That's not one I use very often, but one that I use all the time when I am zoomed way in is if I scroll up and down on the mouse, it will scroll up and down on screen. If I hold control, it will pan left and right.
Yes.
So if I'm zoomed in and want to move around, that's how I typically do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I forgot. I use that all the time for lettering and stuff like that, where you're already zoomed in, the zoom rate, you know, magnification that you want to go, but you just want to move left or right. Yeah, control is a terrific one for that.
I think I use it so much that that's why I don't have hotkeys set up for the zoom tools.
Yeah.
I'm just talking with you.
Okay, so just a couple of tips here before we go. Again, what worked for me forever was to digitize the logos to the artwork, to the edges of the artwork. But then we talked about how much you know, shrinkage we get on the sides and all that kind of stuff. Still, it's easier to hit the lines of the artwork with your embroidery elements and then select the whole design at the end and add some absolute pull comps. So I can grab the whole design, I can, I already have my properties up, and I can affect satin stitches, all multi-line, that would be fills and satins, however you want to affect it, at least the satins. And then I will go to the pull comp tab and I would set it at 1 or 2 points. Remember, this is double because it's to each side. Try 1 if it's a left chest logo. Apply it to everything. You're just going to fatten things up, and it's just going to sew better because it's going to account for that 10% shrinkage we get in embroidery. If you try and overswing the artwork to put in your points, it gets pretty squirrely pretty quick. Just the only way it used to. When I started, they didn't have pull comp, so you had no choice but to stretch along outside the cartoons as it was.
I drug a lot of stuff manually. I like this better.
Yeah, it's so much more precise. Okay, so that's the tip for the day, is always add a little pull comp to your digitizing. I stretch my fills, like I showed you in the past, to the outside edge of the borders that go around it, so I don't really need to add pull compensation to the fills, but if it works for you, if you need it, whatever, know that it's there. Another one too that I see comes through here is if you have a double column border around a fill. This has a single, so not really a problem. But if I had another white, let's say, column border around here, we've been hammering on you to go, you know, center outside, center outside. So normally you do the fill, then you do the inner border, then you do the outer border. I can just tell you from experience, it's so much faster and easier and stuff lines up better if I do the fill, then I do the outer border followed by the inner border.
It's totally outlined and inline.
Yeah, why does this happen? It I guess establishes or anchors the fabric at the outside section, the outside column, and it just holds better. So anyway, think outside the box, but if you have double borders, try and do the outer border before the inner border and break the rules. That's all I have for you today. I hope I've given you some good tools and helped speed up your digitizing, and we will look for you on the next broadcast. Thanks. Have a great day.
See you guys.